It's been quite a journey, this Bad Batch show, and come Wednesday, our adventure with this crew, this family, is also coming to an end.
See? They always work it out. And I don't even see any blood this time.
In many ways, the Bad Batch for an old Clone Wars fan was really just a bittersweet experience. When Disney brought Star Wars more than a decade ago, one of the shows that got axed was the beloved animated Clone Wars series. This was ultimately a business decision, and not necessarily like an evil one. Basically, at the time, the Clone Wars was being created by Lucasfilm for the Cartoon Network because Lucasfilm didn't have their own distributor. When Disney bought all of Star Wars, they realized one of their major animated shows was going to a competitor because Disney had their own cable network. It'd be the equivalent of Disney today making a new season for the Bad Batch and then airing it on Netflix first. Streaming wars now, back then it was the battle of the networks. It was Disney, Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, all fighting for the minds and values of the children who are now the largest adult group in our world. But then Disney launched their streaming platform, Disney Plus, and along with it they announced that a 7th season of the Clone Wars was coming out. It had already been planned somewhat. Many of the storylines and assets had already been created. And so this was cheap and readily available content for Disney's new streaming service, which had very little content at first. And not surprisingly, they really nailed that 7th season of the Clone Wars. It was received well by fans and also critics. This was an unexpected return of an extremely beloved show, and it was handled with a lot of care. Despite some maybe slower arcs here and there, the 7th season finally did bring closure that so many fans were looking for. Those final moments on board the Tribunal with Rex resisting Order 66 and Ahsoka being forced to essentially murder not just a bunch of clones she saw as friends, but a bunch of clones wearing her face on their face. It's twisted, it's heavy, and it's exactly the kind of messed up scenario that I'm sure a lot of fans imagined would have happened. The rows upon rows of makeshift graves of the clones at the end really brings the point home that the Clone Wars era was finally over. But then the Bad Batch kind of sprung out of the grave of the Clone Wars, and that too was also unexpected. Whereas Ahsoka and Captain Rex's story had come to a natural end in the Clone Wars period, preparing them for the Imperial period, the Bad Batch was the complete opposite. Their escape from Kamino marked the beginning of their own new adventure. The best part about this adventure is we get to see a lot more clones, including a lot of our old friends like Rex, Gregor, Echo, Commander Cody, and Wolf. And we also get to meet a bunch of new clones as well. But the bitter part is what these clones have to go through. The callousness, the sheer animosity that some Imperial officers have for the clones is just tough to watch.
Remind me, how long were you left stranded on that Kaminoan platform before being recovered?
32 rotations.
It was somewhere around the 2nd season of the Clone Wars that I came to a realization that yes, this show does reunite us with some of our favorite clone troopers, but it also shows them in probably their most dire and hopeless period.
You could have saved him.
Perhaps you didn't hear me. He is expendable. As are you.
The Grand Army of the Republic, even if it was servitude, gave the clones purpose. It gave them their basic needs, and more importantly, it served as a family for all of them. It was always easy for the Bad Batch to leave given their Special Forces designation, but more importantly, they never truly fit in with the rest of the clone army, and so their family unit wasn't necessarily the army, but each other, a more personal and smaller family unit. The adoption of Omega almost represents the birth of a child for this family, while the conditions the Bad Batch were living in prior to Omega was good enough for the boys. It was clear that Kamino was no longer safe and that Omega needed to be whisked away to another place where someone like her can be nurtured, protected, and grow up to be something truly remarkable. And it's in the backstory of this crazy and devastating replacement of the Clone Army that the Bad Batch's story takes place. Whereas Captain Rex and his clone underground head towards certain doom and death, the Bad Batch story represents a sliver of hope in this era. Omega is not only a pure Fett clone with minor deviations in her DNA, she's also a child, a female child, one with the possibility of bearing offspring one day and passing on the clone's legacy to a new generation. But she still is a child, and so she's heavily reliant on her brothers, and the loss of even one of them, like Tech, can really send her on a different course in life, because these are not only family members to her, but they also mentor Omega and teach her how to be a better soldier and a better person. In today's video, I want to take a look at the remaining members of the Bad Batch and kind of discuss which ones I believe will survive and which ones will die, and what really the impact that will have on Omega because of the important things they bring to the table. But before we continue, a quick word from our sponsor for today's video, ownersaber.com. They have 3 awesome specials running right now. Number 1, if you buy a Master Saber, you can get a second Master Saber with the same soundboard for free. Number 2, if you buy a replica saber, you can get 2 free Padawan sabers with the same soundboard category. And lastly, if you buy 1 Padawan saber, you can get another Padawan saber with the same soundboard for free. Ownersaber.com has some of the best designed lightsabers on the market. I highly recommend you guys check out their page to see all of their offers. If you guys aren't interested in any of the offers that I've mentioned, you can still use our promo code TECH, that's all caps, for an additional 20% off. Thank you for your patience. On to the rest of the video.
Sorry. I just got excited.
There's something immediately likable about Wrecker. It's that hidden gentleness, that giddiness he gets when he sees children. Beyond the big, hulking body and thick armor plating, Wrecker is perhaps the most in touch with his 10-year-old clone self. He finds joy in his job and provides levity in some of the darkest situations in the show. His bright and childlike view of the galaxy makes him a perfect playmate for Omega.
That'll be 14 credits for the Mantell mix.
Put it on Sitch tab.
She can truly be herself around the bruiser, and there's a natural protectiveness that Wrecker has for this tiny clone that just works so well on screen. Of course, Wrecker's absence, which almost occurred in the first season when his inhibitor chip went off prematurely, there are very few things in life that can replace such mass and warmness rolled up into one human being. The reality is, as much as the rest of the Bad Batch loves and wants to nurture Omega, only Wrecker has the capability and mentality to be her playmate, someone who is her peer and at her level. Sure, a child like Omega is adept at adapting to the people around her, but isn't it nice that Wrecker is adapting to her for a change and allowing her to act more natural?
Can we go?
Again?
It's a tradition. It makes the kid happy.
The kid.
Sometimes a kid needs a break from saving the galaxy, and just wants to pal around and blow some stuff up. Wrecker's vulnerability is clear. As the tank, as the heavy, he is always going to be absorbing the most amount of attention and therefore incoming fire. He also happens to be the toughest member of the unit, and the hope is that allows him to make it through the final gauntlet. But with Zillo Beasts, squads of TK troopers, and their clone commandos running around Mount Tantus, Wrecker might be called upon to act as a rear guard so that everyone else can escape. That is usually the task that falls to the heavy. Wrecker's death would force Omega to grow up without her favorite playmates, and this would unfortunately signal her early arrival to adulthood.
I like that it's so quiet out here. I can catch up on the rig manuals. Echo, what is wrong with you?
Echo, despite coming and going from the Bad Batch, is an integral part of this family. And his departure for the Clone Underground really overwhelmed little Omega.
Echo left. Why doesn't that bother you?
I am aware that you miss him, but we have to adapt and move on. That is what soldiers do.
We get a sense that perhaps the clone is not holding together nearly as well as we expected, and that the events surrounding her departure from Kamino have caused far more undue stress and concern than the rest of the team first realized. Echo taught Omega the importance of discipline in the line of duty. He treated Omega as a young soldier and valued her skills pretty early on, and that probably has a lot to do with the horrible ordeal Echo has gone through himself. He obviously understands that Omega is a child and should be treated a bit differently, but he's always been a bit more pragmatic and clinical in how he views one's purpose in life. If you aren't fighting for something worthy, then what are you doing with your life? It's not to say that Echo doesn't care about Omega or love her, but he is willing to take breaks from the Bad Batch in order to pursue outside goals he deems as more important.
We've missed you.
It hasn't been that long.
I think there's a real good chance that Echo will survive this ordeal. He's a concealment and security expert. He's perfect for these types of infiltration missions, and seeing as he already has a TK Trooper suit on, a fake robot hand, and the help of Emery Carr, I think not only will he play a big role in this upcoming battle, he might be the only one who makes it inside of the facility. The rest of the Bad Batch, as far as we know, might just be a distraction force. I mean, for now, that's actually exactly what they are. They've drawn the attention away from the vaults and to the peripherals of the lab. My fear ultimately is that because the Bad Batch is ending, and it's clear that Rex and Echo and the other clones will still be working on freeing the clones, maybe Echo is the only individual who survives this crazy mission. With the Bad Batch all sacrificing themselves and Omega and Echo escaping. In this scenario, I could see Omega dedicating herself to the clone underground movement. Echo, in this case, will be Omega's last surviving family member from the Bad Batch. I think Omega in this situation will become a lot more like Echo. She'll definitely remember the other Bad Batch members and, she'll carry the warmth of their memories with her everywhere she goes, but ultimately she'll become more cold, clinical, and less bright-eyed. And that'd be a shame.
You know what makes us different from battle droids? We make our own decisions, our own choices.
Crosshair, unfortunately, is also on the chopping block, and this has a lot to do with the fact that his character arc already has come full circle. He starts out on the squad, and then he stays with the Empire, becoming a major antagonist for the first season of the show. The second season showed his awakening, and finally, his messy defecation. Ultimately, Crosshair needed Omega a lot more than Omega needed Crosshair, and when Crosshair was completely down and realized that he'd given his life for an Empire that cared very little for his well-being, Omega pitied him and rescued him because that is just who she is. She makes the people around her want to be better, and that's basically Crosshair's only purpose right now. He wants to repay his debt to Omega.
But Omega didn't leave me behind when she could have. I owe her.
And by breaking Crosshair free of his Imperial captors, she's also removed that hard edge that Crosshair has used to survive until now.
You want to know why they put me in charge? It's because I'm willing to do what needs to be done.
And when a character reaches the end of their development cycle, well, that's when they usually either fade away or something more drastic happens. The tremors in Crosshair's hands caused by his own horrible experience under captivity might be foreshadowing Crosshair's eventual demise as well. As an Imperial enforcer, Crosshair has really burnt a lot of bridges with all of the members of the Clone Underground. And since I think this show will eventually merge into a Clone Underground show, that's going to be a problem for Crosshair. It was Crosshair who stopped Captain Hauser's mutiny and probably got a lot of his men killed.
I have unfinished business with this one. Remember me? Surprised I'm alive? Most of my squad from Ryloth is dead because of you.
And so Crosshair's past mistakes will really limit his future opportunities, especially if he wants to work alongside clones once again.
Good to see you again. You too, sir. This is Hunter. Sorry we're late, Commander. We were putting down an insurrection on Yavik Prime when your comm came in. Had a few unforeseen complications.
At the outset of the show, I believe that Hunter was the leader of this unit. I mean, he is the leader of this unit, especially with the, the red Rambo bandana, right? But upon watching him throughout the last 3 seasons, I've come to a conclusion that Hunter is more of a point man than a platoon commander. His instincts are terrific, his ability to perceive physical threats on the battlefield and navigate are terrific. And his tactical leadership and aggressive combat style are also great. But when it comes to bigger picture stuff like figuring out how to keep the Bad Batch alive or handling their finances, Hunter's kind of out of depth here. Hunter, time and time again, places the Bad Batch in terrible situations, oftentimes working for that degenerate Sid for a bargain price. And I guess Hunter's used to working for someone who gives him missions like Commander Cody, and he's just done the same thing here. He's replaced Commander Cody with someone far less reputable in Sid. Hunter doesn't really understand people at all, too, and because of this, he gets manipulated all the time. And even worse, he undervalues just how skilled his crew is. Sid should have been paying a premium for having a clone death squad working for her. I think Hunter's biggest win here is just deciding to take Omega off of Kamino and, protect her. I think this should not be taken for granted. This was not an easy choice to make. Now, Hunter is completely unprepared for how to take care of a young girl, and even with some advice from Cutler Quain on how to do it, he still struggles somewhat. He's just not naturally good at childcare. I think he's stabbed too many people in the face. But still, it doesn't prevent him from at least trying his best to teach Omega everything he knows about killing things. But it becomes very clear that these two are in a completely different league. Omega's brilliance as a tactician actually far outweighs Hunter, and in a lot of ways, the smarter and more experienced she becomes, the more redundant Hunter will become as squad lead. Hunter in the end is a weapon. He is not the most complicated individual, and that makes him vulnerable. With Hunter in charge, the Bad Batch barely stays afloat. With Omega, they can truly flourish. Now, if Omega is capable of what I think she is capable of, aka freeing that Zilla Beast and causing a lot of chaos, this means that Omega is finally ready to step up and take over for Hunter. It doesn't necessarily mean that he has to die, but he definitely is an individual who likes to charge first and think later. Anyway guys, let me know in the comment section below which one of these clones you think will make it and which ones do you think will die and how that affect Omega and I guess this storyline going forward. Even if the series ends, I'm going to assume at least some members of this team are going to make it. Well guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to subscribe, hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.